Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing a free video so you all can see what type of content you can find in my Patreon. Check the link in my profile. In today's video we're going to see how to paint the armor of the Crimson Fist Space Marine chapter and also the Red Fist as well. Here you have a list of all the paints used in this tutorial. We will start with a base coat of Counter Blue over a black primer. I always use the one from Vallejo, but any prime would do it. We're starting with some work with our airbrush, but if you don't have one, don't worry. You can do the same thing step by step using your brush. Make sure your paints are thinned down enough so we don't lose any details on the model. Using an airbrush allows me to paint faster and I find the final result smoother too. I usually work with batches of 5 models or so to do all the airbrush work, when painting a squad for example, right? So that saves me a little bit of time. When using the airbrush, the formula is always the same. I start with some flow improver, that helps the paint to flow better through the airbrush. After that, I add the paint, like in this case, the Counter Blue, and finally, some thinner. I use the one from Vallejo, but you can use water too. And basically, we're trying to get the classic milky consistency that will allow us to paint through the airbrush with thin layers and no problems plugging the airbrush. For the base coat, I use 2 thin layers. Next step is going to be working on the shades. We will do that mix using black, any black will do it, and Counter Blue, roughly 50% mix of each. And then I like to add a drop of Sigbal contrast paint to get that purple touch for the shades. You want the mix to be dark blue but not too purple, so be careful on how much Sigbal contrast paint you add to the mix. For the shades, I will be airbrushing from the bottom of the model and locating the shades on the darkest areas of the model. For the cylindrical parts, like the legs or the shoulder pads, I leave the central area on the light and the edges on shadow, so I create the effect of a cylinder. I usually do 2-3 thin layers until I'm satisfied with the look and the tone of the shades. Here you can see the result after applying the shades. Now we're going to switch to the highlights. For this step, I will be using Calidor Sky, but any lighter blue will do it. You can try and see which one you like the most. Now I'm airbrushing from the top of the model. That will help me creating that natural gradient where the light hits the model from the top. You can see the main focus will be the center of the shoulder pads and legs, and of course the center of the head as well. Like the step before, 2-3 thin layers will do it. For that step, I usually thin the paint a little bit more so I can have a little bit more control over the intensity of the lights when I'm placing them. Here you can see how the model looks once the airbrush work is done. Shades and highlights placed. For this next step, I will be applying a thin layer of gloss varnish, so I can then place the decals and do the oil paint wash, making sure I cannot damage the work done with the airbrush. I'm preparing the oil wash using ivory black from Winsor & Newton and mixing it with mineral spirit. Any brand will do it, until you have a nice liquid consistency that will flow on the recesses of the model. With a small and cheap brush, I'm applying this oil paint mix all over the recesses. If the consistency of the mix is correct, it should rapidly flow through the recesses, just touching it with the brush. If it does not flow enough, you need to add more mineral spirit. And if it flows too much and the recesses don't get colored, you have too much mineral spirit. Once applied over all the recesses in the model, I usually wait around 20 minutes to completely let it set, and then with an inner stick with some mineral spirit, I will clean the areas with mistakes. I'll go over the shoulder pads, legs, head, everywhere, trying to clean up any mistake that I've done with the brush. After cleaning it, I will let it dry for 15-20 more minutes, and then I will apply a thin layer of a satin varnish. You can use any varnish, but I like satin or matte because the gloss varnish is too shiny and reflects the light of my lamp when painting, and makes it very difficult for me painting after that gloss varnish layer. Once the varnish is dry, it's time to switch to the brush. And I will start covering all the details like the gun, the Aquila, etc. with black. Any black will do it. We're covering all the details in black for two reasons mainly. The first one is because it looks cleaner, and this helps me focusing on what I need to paint. And the second reason is because I like to leave a black thin layer underneath the details when painting them, so it clearly separates the different details from the armor. As you can see, the model looks already very good with all the details in black. Once all the details are painted with black, I will switch to the fists. I will start preparing a mix of 50% black and 50% corner red. I will thin it down and apply 2-3 layers over both fists. Once this base coat is dry, I will start glazing with lighter reds. I will start with corner red. I like adding a drop of glaze medium to help with the glazing, but water will work as well. When glazing, remember to not load the brush too much. Consistency is very thin, and then the brush strokes starting from the dark areas towards the area that I'm trying to highlight, so the pigments stay in this more illuminated area. I will apply 2-3 thin layers, and then I will do the same thing with Mephiston red, but covering less area, maybe just 25% of the fist. Now we're going to start edge highlighting the fist with Evil Santh Scarlet. This layer is a little bit thick, and I go around all the fist. The second edge highlight is going to be a mix of 50% Evil Santh Scarlet and 50% Jocaero Orange. And now I will apply it thinner and within the previous step. I will cover just the most exposed areas and I will not touch the darkest areas. So I'll leave them dark. Sorry for the lack of focus in some of the footage, but when I'm painting details, my hands posture and the support with my hands brings the model too close to the camera. I need to be just more aware and correct it. Sorry for that. Last edge highlight layer is going to be with pure Jocaero orange and focusing on the most exposed areas and only on the corners of the fist. For the next step, I will mix some Blood Angels contrast paint with some contrast medium, roughly 1:1 ratio, and I will apply it all over the red area. That will increase the saturation of the colors and will bring the glaze layers and the different colors together. Finally, we will apply some dot highlights on the corners of the fist. I use white on the video, but then I corrected it and used Kislev Flash. I think feels smoother than using just pure white. Now, getting back to the armor, we will start with a chunky edge highlight with Calidor Sky, going over all the edges of the armor panels. This step is very important even if the color is almost not showing up over the airbrush work, because it will help to integrate the rest of the steps moving forward. I'm including some footage from different pieces of the armor so you can see how I position and angle the brush to try to be as neat and accurate as possible. As you can imagine, the rounded areas like the knee pad or similar are very complicated, but with a good position of the brush and a good support with the hands, you should be able to feel more comfortable doing these areas. This is how the model looks after the first edge highlight. It is already looking very good. For the second edge highlight, we're going to use Hoeth Blue. Here you can see how much I thin the paint down and how much I load the brush. When edge highlighting, I think it's very important to get the paint consistency right, so it flows correctly, and then loading the brush at least halfway through the belly so the paint stays wet, and we don't need to go to the palette so often. Be careful not to load the brush to the metallic part, or you will damage the brush if the paint gets dry there. As you can see, I'm going over the previous chunky layer, and I will leave the darkest areas only with the chunky edge highlight, so they stay dark. Take your time on these 2-3 final steps. This is when the final result is coming together, so don't rush and try to be as accurate as possible. Here you can see the result after the second edge highlight. For the last edge highlight step, I will mix Hoeth Blue and Fenrisian Gray, 1:1 ratio. In this step, I will be targeting the most exposed areas and focusing on highlighting the corners of the armor panels. For these final steps, I wear magnifier glasses, as you can see in some of the footage, so I can see the details more accurately, but make my camera get out of focus sometimes, so sorry for that. So this is the final result after this step. Finally, we're going to apply a dot edge highlight with some Parisian gray. I'm picking up some corners on the armor panels, trying to simulate the light reflections over the armor. This final touch is like the cherry on the cake, so don't rush it and make sure we're picking up the most exposed corners of the armor panels. And this is the final result. Now only the details are left to paint. I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. You can find more content like this in my Patreon, check it out. And if you have questions, please let them in the comment box or reach out to me on social media. Thanks for watching, and see you all in the next video.